Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. We are very close to the budget presentation. This time it's been advanced to 1st February, and we are also in the middle of the effects of demonetization and its impact on the economy. So to really sort of dissect the impact of demonetization on the economy and what can the government do to soft land the impact in the budget. We have with us former Chief Economic Advisor in both the UPA government and the NDA, Dr. Shankar Acharya. He's been advising the Finance Minister for the longest time across different regimes. So we believe that he has a better insight and better idea of how different regimes work. So we have him today. Welcome to our show, Dr. Shankar Acharya.
Thank you, Venu.
I've been reading your columns in the Business Standard. You've been giving some very interesting insights, and one that you gave most recently was that we are living in an era of uncertainty. It could be short, medium term uncertainty flowing from external events like the election of Trump as president and various tax policies that President Trump is promising to unfold, and within India we are going through this unprecedented demonetization, after effects of demonetization, where 86% of currency was withdrawn. So could you just explain to us how these uncertainties will play out and how they will impact budget making itself?
Yeah. Well, Venu, you're absolutely right about uncertainty. I mean, uncertainty is always with us. The future is always uncertain. But I think we're going through a period now of very heightened uncertainty, and something that I don't recall in the recent past, at least. Yeah. That level of uncertainty.
There's normal uncertainty, then there's heightened uncertainty.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think if I were to pick out 2 or 3 things, some of them you mentioned. You mentioned the election of Mr. Trump as President-elect of the United States, which is still the single largest national economy, yeah, and by far the most important military power in the world. You mentioned demonetization. It's interesting, both these things happened on November 8th,
yeah,
if you remember, which is quite a coincidence.
It was probably a coincidence.
Yeah, I think it's a coincidence. I don't think it was planned. Yeah. I think also we should also remember another element in the brew, which is that I think the decade from somewhere around 2007 to somewhere around the year that we just finished, 2016, and perhaps beyond, you could characterize that as a decisive decade for deglobalization. I mean, at least it's a watershed. I mean, lots of things happened during that time. I don't want to spend time going over them, but I think it wasn't a good decade for globalization. Yeah. So all of this, I think, adds up to creating a very difficult environment for any national government to conduct economic policy, and I think that's true for us too in India. And of course, insofar as the budget is a major instrument of national economic policy, it's true for us. But I'd add one more thought to you, and it's not for you to pick up if you like. In some ways today in India, some of the most important things that we have to do in the next few months are in a way outside the budget proper.
Okay. So, Shankar, how do you, so far there is a feeling that that the output loss caused by demonetization, especially in the second half of FY17, has not been quantified either by the CSO or by the RBI, probably because it's difficult to quantify at this moment, because we are still in the middle of it. Now, but some agencies have reduced the GDP growth forecast for 16-17. IMF reduced the forecast only yesterday by 1 percentage point. So how do you, if you are making the budget, without important or critical data, at your command, how do you make projections? Because if you don't estimate what has happened the 6 months, second half of FY17, how can you make a budget? How can you shoot in the dark without proper data? Is that a challenge?
I think it's a huge challenge. I mean, I think there are really two very big uncertainties as far as the narrow budget making is concerned. Other than the general ones that we talked about already.
You have to make assumptions in the budget, right?
I mean, one, and this is separate from the one you made, is that we don't know when GST is going to kick in.
Okay.
I mean, we had today's newspapers say that
July is what the finance minister is talking about.
Yes. I mean, until 2 weeks ago, he was talking about still April. Now it's shifted to July, but that's presumably because some significant progress was made in the GST Council yesterday. I've only seen, obviously, newspaper reports. I have nothing else to go on. But that seemed to be very encouraging that July 1 could happen. But even then, that means that for somebody in North Block who's involved in doing all the paperwork, the regular work for the budget, think of the budget at a glance, which we all look at. What do you put, under indirect taxes?
Exactly.
How do you do it?
It has fundamentally changed.
Budget
making.
What numbers do you put?
There's no excise. There's no.
Well, and you don't know what numbers to put. If it was started April 1, at least you could say GST and move on. But this time you don't know when in the year this change will occur, assuming it does occur.
And also, it can't be delayed beyond September because the constitutional amendment does not allow you to.
Though some people tell me that can be extended.
The taxation
that with some presidential approval that can be extended.
It can be extended.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if that's true.
But adds to the uncertainty.
But the uncertainty is clearly. I mean, this has nothing to do with the global environment. It's just that the timing of the GST, which was originally April 1, the changeover to that. Now, obviously, if the minister is saying that's not happening, it's not happening. Now the hope is July 1. What do you actually, the person making the budget at a glance, he's in a tough spot. The other thing, of course, is what you have alluded to, which is one number which is crucial for doing the budget numbers is the nominal growth and level of GDP. Nominal growth and nominal GDP, because it acts as a ratio, to fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, and so on and so forth. On the
all other ratios flow from the nominal GDP.
Nominal GDP, one, and two, in projecting all sorts of things like revenue. Nominal GDP is the key variable on the right-hand side, if you like, as far as tax buoyancy. I mean, even direct taxes, which are not, after all, being subject to a revolution like the indirect taxes, you have to make some assumption on what is going to be nominal GDP growth. Now, this is a bit tricky when, as we know, all the things that you mentioned, that because of demonetization, I mean, there's a huge range of numbers that have been tossed around by various investment banks and so forth as to what the impact in the short run.
The range is 3 percentage point reduction GDP to the official claim of 0.5 to probably 1%.
Right. And I think former Prime Minister in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha had said it would be 2%.
2%.
So, all sorts of numbers. And the truth is we don't know. And we will only know quite a few months later when actual official numbers for these quarters become available, namely the quarter we've just had and the quarter we are in. And I would add another caution. Even then, even when the official numbers are available for these two quarters, which would be by end of May, early June, there's an issue of how well that is being capturing reality. Because one of the major impacts of demonetization in the short run, this is not about costs and benefits of demonetization, but one of the short-run impacts, everybody agrees it's in the short run hurting GDP and
short to medium,
yeah.
6 months.
Yeah, but they don't know how much. Huh?
Yeah.
But they also agree that the brunt of it is being borne by what's called the unorganized or informal sector, which is about 40 to 45% of our economy, because that's the part that's hugely cash dependent. And problem is that that's where our estimates by CSO are on the weakest grounds.
Like services, small service providers.
Small business, small service, things like ASI, the Annual Survey of Industries and so on. Doesn't
So that adds to the problem.
So all I'm saying is that even when the first round of official numbers come out, you don't know really that that's the truth.
Yeah, Shankar, I want to ask you something. Since you've been associated with official policy making, estimating numbers for so many years, you had been. Some people are arguing that since informal sector is in any case not getting fully captured in the GDP, so some of the output loss there will not really sort of impact GDP. This is one argument I've heard. But the commonsensical counter to that is, even if the small informal sector, which probably is outside the even excise net or a tax net, and these are cash, this is cash economy, they would also go and buy consumer goods, right? So they would buy Hindustan Lever products. So in some ways they do reflect in the sales of Hindustan Lever, which then becomes official, right? So in this flow of money, black and white cannot be sort of seen as existing two separate compartments.
No, absolutely. And I want to get away from the notion that informal means black. That's certainly not the case. It's just that informal sector is cash dependent.
There's an inherent suggestion that a lot of it is also black because they're outside the tax net.
We don't. Yeah,
but we don't know.
That's really not true.
Yeah.
And I mean, you really need to go into the methodology and the national income estimates of how you do the informal sector.
Absolutely, This is all loose talk in the sense
right.
all these arguments are coming,
Yeah, but your point is absolutely right. That the informal sector may be more, if you like, hit by demonetization in the short run, but there's a feedback loop to the formal sector
feedback loop.
These are not sort of separate little pockets. They're all interconnected in the same economy.
Like the small garment outfits, people who the darzis who do buttons.
Yeah.
They probably feed into our garment exports.
Absolutely.
They serve the European market for
and I mean, as I recall, I haven't looked at these numbers recently, that 40% of our exports come from what we call small scale.
So Shankar, now of course you spoke about the difficulty in terms of making budget projections because we still don't know, we can't quantify the output loss, but certain things can be quantified, right? So for instance, investment demand or gross fixed capital formation is seeing a big fall. There is one piece of data which really surprised me, was for the first 6 months of this financial year, the gross fixed capital formation as a ratio of GDP has fallen by 4 percentage points compared to the first 6 months of the previous financial year. Now, do you feel that the investment, as it is, the private investment story was very weak? Now, do you think this demonetization further pushes the revival of the investment story?
I think it probably makes it a bigger challenge. And if one moves a little bit to now, in a sense, what are the challenges for the government, whether in budget or outside? I mean, I think, and I go back to what I had said earlier about some of the most important things that government needs to do at this juncture is perhaps outside the budget. For example, I think the remonetization that has been going on.
This is outside the budget,
It's independent of the budget. It needs to be done. It needs to be done fast. But there too, an interesting policy issue arises. And we don't know the answer to what government's answer to that. We know that something like 15.5 lakh crore by value
has come back into the
was in the initial, was quote unquote demonetized,
and 95% of it is back in the system.
I don't know the exact number, but they're bandied around 95, 97 and so on.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is something else, that that's come back. But in terms of the currency in circulation,
Yeah.
this is currency. This is not what's come back to banks,
Yeah.
deposits, because that's come back in the sense of got turned into deposits.
Yeah.
But currency in circulation, that 15.5 lakh crores that was taken out, what is government's idea of how much they would want to actually have the currency go back to?
Go back, yeah.
And I think that's
The finance minister has said that all of it need not go back.
no,
He's made a
absolutely,
statement,
no, absolutely right, and I can see the logic of that. That you don't want, that you may feel, you want to put pressure to move away from cash and at the margin and so forth. But I think there will be a policy issue there of, do you remonetize back to say 12.5 lakh crore of the amount that you took out, or to 14, or what?
What is the policy question there?
No, the policy question is, what do you remonetize to? Because, I mean, there's a difference. You took away 15.5, right? Or if you want to have the full total, we were, I think, at 18.
Yeah.
You didn't disturb 2.5, the small notes,
Yeah.
100 rupee and
Yeah,
so on.
sure.
So 18 was where we were. You took away 15.5.
Yeah.
Now, when you go back, do you go back to something like 13, 14, or do you go back to 15, 16
So
of
what
the total?
So what should guide that decision?
I mean, my own view, if that is the band, you should be at the upper end of the band.
Okay.
Because I think otherwise you are, constricting. I mean, cash plays a role.
Yes.
It plays perhaps a bad role in
Yeah.
some sense, black money and
But
all
tell me,
that.
Shankar, I want to, since you've studied global economies also.
Can I just finish one thought?
Yeah, point. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
just to finish
okay.
that, outside the budget, this is very important, that you have,
Yeah.
you have to continue with remonetizing, and you have to do it, I think, in my view, a little more generously.
Cash
than-
plays a role, so be careful that
Yeah.
you don't starve the
Right.
cash economy.
Right.
That's what it
and,
means.
and the other thing, of course, is the big thing, in a sense, the government's flagship reform, GST, which
Outside the budget.
it's outside the budget, and we have all been hoping that it will come, even though we may have some worries about the actual form that it's now coming in.
Yeah.
But we would like to see it come. So, and
So these are
all
two
part of the
big
finance.
pieces which are outside the budget.
Yeah, and all part of the finance minister and his colleagues on both those fronts, and that's not in the budget, neither of them.
Can I ask you one question, Shankar? There is a feeling among political parties, opposition, also within ruling. I've spoken to some ruling party people. They feel that demonetization was one disruption, a short to medium term disruption. Immediately on top of it comes GST, which is also disruptive. It's positive move, but it is disruptive in the short to medium term. Various various estimates have been thrown about as to what in the initial period GDP could go down or inflation would go up because some people will lose, some people gain. Now, purely, what's your gut feel as a former advisor to the government? If you were advisor, would you worry about this double disruption?
I mean, I would worry in the sense, I agree with you that, and with others who say that GST is a very complex reform, and that when you shift from our old pattern of indirect taxes to GST, it's not going to settle overnight. It will take.
It may take a year.
I think at least a year. It might take a couple of years. It'll progress, and there'll be tweaking to be done. There'll be glitches to be sorted out, and all of that. So, yes, I think in the short run there will be disruption from that, which I think is largely unavoidable. I mean, you can do things better rather than worse, but some disruption there will be, which will get ironed out as months roll by. Now, so if you are saying there are two of these disruptions happening close to each other, yes, I agree. But in a sense, the demonetization one, I think, was a surprise to everybody when it happened in November. I don't think that, given that that was done with sort of, if you like, the motivation was the right one and so on and so forth. Yeah. That
one agrees with the motivation, agrees with the larger long-term effects.
Right. I mean, given that that's going on, doesn't mean that I think you should now put this on the back burner, GST. I mean, I think it's important.
But you should be prepared to manage the disruption.
I think it's making it will be a more complex than otherwise, and therefore it will be a challenge. But I think if you
would it become a little more complex because it is preceded by the demonetization effect?
Well, only in the sense that having two major disruptions back to back are
so that is an issue.
Yeah, that's an issue. But I certainly wouldn't argue that therefore, let's forget about GST this year completely. We do it next year.
Another question, like Shankar, which is also outside the budget.
Yeah.
I think you are absolutely right when you say there are some big elephants in the room which are outside the budget. One is
which are different from normal years.
Yeah, different from normal years. And one, of course, is the way the financial sector is being its behavior is being envisaged post demonetization.
Yeah.
Banks getting a lot of money,
SBI
dropping lending rates by 90 basis points. What is this leading up to? I mean, is the financial sector, the fundamental problems of NPAs and other issues, will they go away if the bank liquidity improves, or what?
Not necessarily. I mean, first of all, this surge in deposits, I think one has to recognize, is to some extent, to possibly a large extent, temporary. Because you've sucked the money in. You've told people that
the SBI chairman says 40% may go back, may get withdrawn very soon.
That's right. I mean, once as the demonetization occurs,
and restriction of withdrawal is removed.
Because people will want to keep their money in different forms. Bank deposits, cash, equities, whatever it is. So I think some of it will go back when you allow them to draw money.
With the fundamental problems facing the financial sector, banks, will it?
But you see, I think on the going back to your NPA side and the need for capital, those problems have not gone. I think in some ways you could argue that to the extent that enterprises to whom banks have lent, these could be manufacturing, it could be small business, it could be real estate, it could be whatever. They have been, if you like, weakened by the slowdown,
temporary. Further weakened by
the slowdown associated with demonetization in the short run, that it exacerbates the
ability to
the NPA situation.
In fact, on the contrary, they think the small industry, which has been hit badly, there may be more NPAs from among them, because as former RBI Governor Dr. Reddy, I spoke to him some time ago, he said typically 30% of the working capital of small SMEs come from the parallel economy. So it will be very urgent to lubricate the working capital. Some of the money is back in the system.
No, so therefore I think the short point is, I think the problems that we had, particularly in the public sector banks, of substantial NPAs, as well as stressed assets, which are over and above NPAs, those are very much there. At the same time, and might have got, if you like, exacerbated to some extent, and at the same time, fresh lending opportunities, which are, if you like, cleaner and productive and all that, will take a bit of time to come until the economy picks up again. So I think that big set of problems is very much an elephant that is still around, and that government, RBI and other authorities need to deal with.
Finally, Shankar, I want your comment on what Dr. Venu Reddy said last week about the way RBI is being perceived now. And he specifically said that perception is more important what a central bank does. So he's talking about a reputational risk having surfaced in regard to our central bank. Would you go with that?
Well, I mean, I can only go by what one reads in the newspapers and people tell you, and I mean, certainly this is around, that people do feel that this whole operation has taken something away from the perceived autonomy of the RBI in a domain in which you expect it to play a very major role. So it is there. And I mean, Dr. Reddy is not the only one. I mean, Dr. Jalan has also, I think,
yeah,
made
a lot of former governors have spoken about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I think it's a big issue.
So a lot
and these are very, how shall I say, these are very non-concrete issues, but they're nevertheless very important. We haven't talked about the budget.
Yeah, this is also outside the budget, and budget cannot solve reputational risk. Anyway, a lot on the government's plate in the coming weeks. Thank you very much, Dr. Shankar Acharya, for talking to us. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Venu.
That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. Thanks for watching.